No, in all seriousness, I'm going to sit down in a second because I'm still trying to digest a little more before. But these are some very, very special devotees that we have here. You've already heard from a couple of them, and we're just kind of taking full advantage of their being here. I had some little bit of background, but where did I have that? Anyway, I'll just have to do this from memory. We wanted to do a little something on fatherhood, in part because it's such an important aspect of being a guy. Not that all of us are necessarily going to be biological fathers, but temple leaders, it's a fatherly role. As mentors, it's a fatherly role, caring for people. Newer devotees, younger people. And for many of us, we will be biological fathers or are biological fathers, or maybe the kids are out of the nest and it's time to share our wisdom. So we thought, it'd be good to have a panel presentation. Rather than, we don't have necessarily, as we did previously with John, a real expert on addictions and all those things. So we thought, let's really take advantage of some life experience here. So Madhavacarya Prabhu is an anesthesiologist, medical doctor, practicing in Washington, D.C., and he's also the head of the IFAST community in Washington, one of the senior disciples of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, and he's kind of carried on that mood and mission of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. So his home, anybody who lives in Washington, D.C. knows you can practically go to his house 24 hours a day. The doors open. They have beautiful deities worship there. It's not just like home programs. It's a temple that happens to be in their home. And in that spirit, he really manifests that fatherly affection for the whole community. And he has two sons who are full-grown young men now. So he's kind of, the boys have grown up and out of the nest to one extent or the other. So that's very perspective. For Vani, Vani is in the midst of the storm. He has 3 kids, one who just went to college about 2 weeks ago. A second one, Revati, his daughter Revati, and then second a daughter who's now a junior in high school, and then a son who's in 8th grade this year. So father of 3, active participant in the fatherly role, continuing in, 2 in the house, 1 out of the house. Venkata Prabhu is the daughter of a 13-year-old. That Prashadam was so good. It's the sweet and sour that really gets to you. He is the father of a 13-year-old daughter, Shruti, who is now in, is it 8th grade? 8th grade. And he was telling us outside she's very bright. She takes after her mother. She's great. Yeah. No, you missed that one, Venkata. I've been saving that one for you. No, she's very bright, and he was sharing with us some of the challenging questions she has for him. And very much, we all know teenage years are challenging for everybody. And then we have the baby in the group. Radhika Raman, who is just entering the exciting years. He's got a son who's 12, and another one just behind him who's 10. So, the teenage experience. So we've got pre-teenage, in the middle of teenage, some in teenage, and I made it. Although the challenges remain in some way. So anyway, we wanted to... So I'm just going to...
Wait, the joke to make with Radhika Raman Prabhu is,
yes,
your son is 10. What year of college is he in?
Did you hear that? He said the question to ask Vani is, your son is 10, so what year in college is he now? That was very good. Okay, so we just want to have kind of like an open flowing conversation. I had some general questions I put together just to kind of tap into some of their knowledge. We'll see where it goes. The first question may lead to the whole discussion, and that's it. We'll open up for some questions, or maybe go a little shorter, just kind of play it by ear. So we do have some very experienced fathers here explaining different generations, different ages of kids. So these are just some of the questions I wanted to kind of put forward, and some of them are really generic, and I think they're going to open up a storehouse of information. And maybe for the first one, we'll start and go down the line. Simple thing, Madhavacarya, what do you like most about being a father? And if we can do it in the same breath, what's been most challenging for you? Again, that in itself could be like a PhD thesis, right, Radhika? So what do you like most about being a father? Let me start, because you're really interesting.
Yes, Max, you should
No,
start.
what do you like most about being a father, and what was the most challenging?
I'll tell you what I miss most is that I miss when they were young, and I would hold their hands and we would walk along, pick them up and we'd cross the street, and that real sweet intimacy with the young kids. I miss that. That's tough. And but that's what I miss the most. The most challenging thing, and the greatest thing is that, there are these two beautiful souls that Krishna has entrusted in my care, and executing that service, I learned some things about myself. In my own particular case, with my case, it hasn't been like they're beautiful, wonderful young men, just incredibly kind-hearted, gracious, and compassionate beings. But our path hasn't been, straightforward. There's been some twists and turns. And one of the things I found out about myself is that while I loved them, that I found out that I also had some, how do I say this? There was a part of this service where I was happy to be a father because I thought this would bring some type of, glorification to me. You know what I'm saying? My kids are so brilliant, they're wonderful. This makes me look good. This adds to my prestige. My kids have accomplished this and that. This makes me look good. It's not about them. There was a little contamination there that I discovered when things went a little rough, that I had, that this is a little bit about me, and I had to, of course, in order to do the service nicely, I had to, recognize that and deal with that. So that was good to see that, and just, the service, it's just, it facilitates growing, increasing your selflessness and your increasing your ability to love in an unconditional way. It facilitates that growth.
Yeah, they've got a hand. So same question. Gaura, what do you like most about being a father, and what's been most difficult?
Well, one thing is I just got to say how honored I am to be on this panel with these devotees. I have so much respect for all of you guys. And I also want to say how proud I am of Pitta, my stepfather, for pulling this whole thing together. I'm honored to be your kid. What I love most about being a father is, and also about being a husband, is that I've witnessed my capacity to love has expanded beyond my what I thought was possible. Like, I remember fears. I don't know if any other fathers had this experience. I remember worrying, counting my first child's fingers and toes. Oh my God, I'm like my mom. I just like cry immediately. I remember thinking that I was so grateful that Krishna didn't serve me up my bad karma in my children. Somehow or other, he let me have a pass. All the things that I had done, I was worried somehow or other Krishna was going to punish me. And I remember counting my daughter's fingers and toes and just realizing that she was great, she was whole. And then I remember thinking afterwards, sorry, Prabhu's, All my toxic masculinity is coming out from my eyes. I remember thinking that I loved her so much, and we had our next kid. I thought, am I going to be able to love my other kids the same way that I loved my first kid? And just watching actually almost like a physiological experience of my heart expanding when the second kid came. It's like, oh my gosh, like the capacity to love is actually unlimited. Because my heart has grown twice as big as it was. And quite frankly, my experience with being married is that what I thought was love was actually mostly lust. And as I've grown older, I'm learning how to love my wife as a human being and a spiritual person. And then that heart's expanding even wider. It's like, wow, Krishna, when you think about the devotees, you think about Krishna's heart, it's really quite incredible. Most challenging is, material world is just like I was just telling you. So I'm just going to launch into this story really quick, because maybe that's what I'm doing. So there's this musician who had this concert where a bunch of people died from a crowd crush. It's like in the news. I'm a little bit of a news junkie. Like, not so much, but I kind of, because of my service as a Kirtaniya, I like to talk about topical things as an introduction to the mantra and things like that. It helps me for people to feel this weird thing that I do, which is like singing Hindu prayers or whatever, is relevant. It's like, oh, this guy knows more about things going on in the world than I do, but yet he's doing that. So I always try and keep up with the news, and when there's something that comes up, I share it with my kids. So this concert, I was reading about this guy, this artist, and the way he became so famous that so many people were rowdy at his concert was there's this virtual game called Fortnite. And for those of you who don't know, Fortnite is a completely immersive world where you drop in an airplane and you're wearing the skin of a character that you can design basically however you want. You can pay real world money to wear a body. And you can have horns, or you can have kind of crazy outfits, you can do special dances, all kinds of things in this character. And you drop into this world with the most flamboyant or realistic weaponry, and you just go around shooting everyone else in the world. And you're all just in there trying to kill each other. But it's kind of very playful, and it's just, everyone knows what they're there for. And so my son plays this game with his friends. I would not have wanted him to play this game, but he's in this world, and his friends play these games, and it's how can you be a devotee? Nick asked me this, how do you be a devotee without being oppressive? And I was well, you've got to try and give and take. So it's he's playing this game, we're pretty careful about how much we let him play it, as much as we can be. But anyway, so I read this article, and in this article it said that this artist, the way he became super famous was, in the game, he had a surprise concert. And people didn't know about it, but somewhere in the world was a stage, and you could fly there, get there, jump there, run there, drive there, in the virtual world. And there he was on the stage doing a live concert in the game at this prearranged time. So people all over the world knew and showed up in the game at the concert. And in the middle of the concert, his character, this artist, grew till he was the size of a four-story building. It was dancing around, crushing everything. It was a concert that no one could ever have in real life he had in this virtual world. And people just blew their minds. They're just oh my God, this guy's amazing. So I said this to my kids, can you believe that this is what's happening in the world? And then this culture and energy created this real life kind of crazy, insane human crush where a 9-year-old boy, I think even was injured or killed, something like that. And my son, you know what my son said to me? I know, I was there. My son was at the virtual concert. in the games. And I had no idea that there was even such a thing that existed, was to speak of the fact that my son had been there at this concert. So I think the toughest thing in my parenting so far is I feel like, material energy is like banging on the windows and doors of my children's life right now. And I'm just like, I have no idea how to control it.
Thank you, man. That is close to home also. Not necessarily that game, but some other things. I think the thing that I love most is, in a sense, also the thing that is the hardest. And it's a word. I'm going to use a word that we overuse and we use in different ways, and we can unpack, but the word is attachment. So what I actually love about being a father is, in one sense, the opportunity to be attached to another person in such a deep way that in its best form gives me a glimpse into how much Krishna must love me and must love all of us. Like the fact that I get to model that kind of, I'm calling it attachment kind of facetiously, because I know that has a negative connotation for most of us, but that level of care, to be able to be a giver of that level of care, not because like I or we, like just like it just naturally almost kind of like surprised me how much of a natural drive there was to just to care about someone so much. And like I said, it gives me a glimpse. My wife and I struggled for a number of years with fertility issues, and we tried different things. I won't go into details, but in terms of like Ayurvedic stuff and Western medical stuff, and just different things. We asked so many devotees to pray for us, and at a certain point where we were kind of making peace with the fact that we might not actually have a child, or at least biologically have a child, and my wife and mother-in-law all went on pilgrimage to Vrindavan, and I couldn't go because I just started this new job at Princeton. And they went to Vrindavan during Kartik, and they ended up as part of this yatra at Radhakund. And my wife offered a gila at Radhakund, like many of you have probably done. And there was this old like Brijbasi lady, like resident of Radhakund, like a Radhakund Basi, and she only spoke Braj Bhasha, and my wife doesn't speak Braj Bhasha. But like somehow they had this exchange, and she just like, my wife didn't say anything. She didn't say what she was praying or thinking, but of course at that time this is weighing so much on our hearts. And my wife offered Krishnandi offered the diya, and then this, like out of nowhere, this elderly Brijbasi came and just like hugged her, and then like started like, it sounds a little funny to talk about, but she started like kind of pointing at her like her belly, and was like kind of like blessing, like I'm like blessing. I think maybe many women come with that prayer. Maybe it was mystical, it wasn't, but long story short, we conceived like right after that, and then our daughter was born on Radhashtami morning. So I mean, every parent feels this way, and should feel this way, that their children are gifts from Krishna, but I really feel like more than a gift from Krishna, like our daughter is a gift from Radharani. And so there's that like soft heartedness and just total like gift of compassion. And so I want to be attached to her, to Shruti, our daughter's name is Shruti Sada, to be attached to Shruti the way that you're like, when the person who loves you the most gives you a gift, and you'll like never give up that gift for anything in the world, and you're just like, it's the most precious thing in your life, right? On the flip side, another way of looking at attachment is, especially as Shruti's gotten older, I've noticed, even though I promised myself I would never do this, but the amount that I invest my own, kind of like Madhavacarya, we were saying, like the amount that I invest my own hopes, dreams, expectations, plans, and project them onto her, that kind of form of, I think, very unhealthy attachment. And that's something that I experienced directly that my dad did with me, and it really was one of the factors that very much damaged our relationship. And I swore I'd never do that, and now my daughter is like in middle school and applying for admission into like high school, and we're already starting to think about college, and I find myself going there constantly, and I find myself kind of like, you know, I kind of grew up in a household where like, if I came home with, you know, I would come home, my dad would come home from work and say, his first question before anything else, not like, how was your day or anything, but he was like, he would say, did you get any test papers back? And then, you know, if I did, I'd have to show him, and if it would be like, let's say I would get like a 98%, then he had a follow-up question. So no one gets what the follow-up question is. What happened to the 2 points? And then if I got 100%, he had more follow-up question. How many other kids in your class got 100? So you internalize all this stuff. And I swore I'm never going to do that to my kid. I'm never going to do that to my kid. And a number of times I found myself, more subtle ways, but I found myself doing it. It's humbling. It's like deeply humbling and kind of, you know, terrifying in a way. But I consider that a very unhealthy form of attachment, because I know that's me putting my stuff onto her. That's not really her.
Thank you.
So I have 2 things on each side. I think one of the nicest things for me has been the discovery process of discovering who my boys are. I know before I became a father, I had this idea that babies all came in a generic package. You know, they're all kind of the same, and they all cried the same, and they all behaved the same, and it was when they became older that you saw the difference. And I remember the very first time I heard my older sons cry. It was like immediately, he's his own person. This is a distinctive human being with his own karma, his own background. And then when I had my second child, Purushottam, he's completely different in the manner he cried from the day he was born. Chaitanya's cry was demanding. It was like, I'm the boss around here, I needed something, where are you all at? And Purushottam's cry from the very start was, no one loves me here, I know I'm not cared for, but if anyone has any time, please come help. And totally, and as they grow up, they're just as distinctive. And it's like this whole kind of discovery process of who did Krishna give me, and who are they turning out to be, and how do I care for them in a way that they become who Krishna wants them to be. And it's fun. It's like a lot of fun watching them become who they are. Same parents, and same house, and same basic environment, and yet they're growing up to be two totally distinct individuals. So that discovery process is fun, a lot of fun. On a more concrete level, I think the thing that I like the most has been something we've been doing since the day they could talk, practically, is every night before going to bed, instead of story time, we do something called discussion time. And I know it's not the coolest name, but we've all grown to like it a lot. And they wait all day for it, I wait all day for it. And it's just talking about whatever's on their mind, or whatever's on my mind. How was your day? And it's incredible because it's a front row seat to their mindset and where they're coming from and what's bothering them. We have gone from talking about different kinds of toys to screen time and, video games, to girls and what that means, and to changes in boys' bodies. And it's like there's a whole range of things. And it's this one time where they really feel like they can bring up anything. But I let them drive the discussion, because if I start turning it into, here's my moment to tell you what I think, your day should have been like, or that kind of thing, then it just kind of messes up the whole mystique. But that...
Is that just with you, or?
Yeah, just with me. Just with me. So they get a lot of time with mom during the day because she's homeschooling them and so on. So evening times are sort of like my time with the kids, and Amrita gets more of a break. But that time just before bed is kind of the most precious time.
Like an hour or half hour?
It can vary based on the topic. So when they bring up like things that are really deep or sensitive or whatever, sometimes it can go half an hour, 45 minutes. And sometimes it's just 10 minutes and we're just all very tired and they had a good day or they're not into talking or whatever. But it's like, it's a must, that their day doesn't end until that happens. And so anyway, let's see how long that continues. I'm hopeful. But so far, that's been really special. In terms of things that have been the toughest, I think for me the toughest has been how much to hold them back and how much to let them go. And that decision, love can often mean holding tight, and love can also mean letting go. And at what point you're supposed to hold on, and at what point you're supposed to let go. How much control and how much freedom. That's been a thing that I think about constantly. And it's never an easy decision trying to figure out. Amrita and I have a lot of conversations about this, trying to figure out, okay, is this the right age to let them go on their own, or should we be going with them? Are they going to be safe in this way, or should we, and kind of all those hundreds of little decisions that we make. The other thing I'll say, which has been the toughest so far for me, was the first 4 or 5 years. They were just, for both of them, but especially for our first one, because it was my first experience being a father, and it completely overtakes your life, and it overtook my life. And it feels like it'll never end. The lack of sleep, the constant worry. I had dreams, like I've dreamt about them constantly, every night. And it's always dreams of worry. What are they doing? Or they're in a difficult situation and I can't protect them. And kind of come to realize just how deep that bond is at a subtle level. That even if I'm physically, outwardly, completely not worried, but it comes out. Right? It comes out in all these dreams at night and so on. But the first 5 years were particularly in kind of shifting my identity from I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, and I'm going to pursue my goals and hopes, to then after marriage, no, we can do whatever we want, and we're going to pursue our hopes and goals together, to no one's pursuing their hopes and goals.
So I'm just thinking, I try to listen to Prabhu lecture every day as much as I can. And several times, just this week again, Prabhu was giving the example of how Krishna loves the soul so much, and he comes again and again, and there's so many efforts to try to bring us back, and Lord Chaitanya's mercy. And Prabhupada often would give the example of how the son can forget the father, but the father can never forget the son. And I just heard the other day, he was saying, even if the relationship seems to be broken, if there's some distance between, when the son comes back, the son or daughter, how immediately the father has so much affection there. So I think these are 4 beautiful representations of that affection that's there. So thank you again for being here. So some more difficult questions as a community. Fatherhood has been sometimes minimized in the larger ISKCON society. along with perhaps parenting in general, but I think fathering even more so. Why do you, as you obviously do, explore this a little more, why do you feel parenting is important for the fathers especially? And any thoughts on balancing that? Because oftentimes in the society, the male's the one that goes out and works hard and makes the money, and it's up to mom to take care of the kids. And that was the role of my parents, certainly. That's changed in the society at large, and there's a lot of discussion about that, but I think in this kind, maybe not so much. So I think maybe moms are expected to care for their kids more these days than they were maybe years ago. It's kind of like put your kid aside because you have a duty to Krishna, and that's the best way to raise your children. So I think we've moved a long ways away from that, but maybe there's still a little residual about father's important role in raising children. So some comments on that. Is it important for me? I think let's do the same order, because I want to just break up the, go around. So why is it, why do you feel it's really, because obviously you all do, why is it important for the fathers? And what about the challenge of balancing that with other responsibilities?
Okay, Krishna. I'm gonna let my esteemed colleagues deal with that in detail. I just want to give an example from my own specific experience, and that's I raised my children in a little bit of a different situation in that when they were born into an institute house. Bhatta Swami was my guru, is my guru. He lived with us for months at a time during the course of the year, and that meant that the devotees were always there. It meant that we always had 2 or 3 people living with us who were devotees in service to Bhatta Swami. And so there was always that tension there for me, because I'm his disciple and he's my guru and I'm to serve him. And yet I have a wife and these 2 boys here also to serve simultaneously. And I will say this, that Bhatta Swami always directed me, both verbally and subtly, to kind of take care of the family first. You know what I mean? He could have said, okay, Madhavacarya, come on, I need this, I need X, Y, Z, do the service. But he never did that. He would always, as I said, directly and indirectly make sure that I prioritize the care of my wife and children. And he would say, I have many disciples, but they only have one father. So, take care of that. And I appreciated that really. Everyone in my family appreciated that. And he would even, to highlight the importance of that service, he would participate in family activities, we would, birthdays, Christmas morning, he would come down and sit by the tree and open gifts with the kids and everything. He would participate in these family rituals, just to emphasize that this service is an important service. That these children are beloved by Krishna, and taking care of them and facilitating their growth and development in a loving way is your main service. So, yeah.
So, same question. Fatherhood sometimes minimized in ISKCON and Hare Krishna movement. So, why your thoughts on why is parenting important? In particular for fathers, and any thoughts on how to balance that with what other responsibilities do you have?
I'm trying to look around the room to see if there are any other people from my generation in the same way in ISKCON, because I know we're the same generation, but it's a different experience. My generation was the generation where if you did the right thing as a parent, you sent your kids to Gurukula. And from my generation backwards, let's say, so my generation, those older than me, pretty much everyone had a at some point, pretty lousy experience in Gurukul.
Yeah, when you were a boy.
So from my generation backwards, right, as a boy, as a child. So there's this kind of universal experience of everyone sending their kids to Gurukul who was a serious devotee, and pretty much everyone having a rough time in Gurukul. Now, some of that has to do with our movement, and some of that just has to do with boarding schools. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine who went to boarding school in India, British boarding school in India, not at all connected to the movement in any way. And it was like, as he described his experience, I was like, oh my God, you're my brother, like boarding school. It's like, maybe it wasn't about Gurukul, this was about boarding school, which for English people was like part of making your child a man. You know, it's like, send him out into the world and let him experience. So that has changed a lot. And, you know, a big part of my, of the style of parent that I've tried to be has been affected by that. You know, me trying not to be in any way a parent. Like, you know, I went to Gurukul in Itanagari at 4, boarding Gurukul at 4. My mom was on the property, but I was like peeing in my bed and in a bunk, you know, with a bunch of other kids at 4, away from my mom. And I remember, like, so I just dropped off my 18-year-old at college in Louisiana, and we're like heartbroken and whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, 4 years old at 4, like at 14 years to that, and I still am not sure, does she know how to feed herself? But another big part of how I've just tried to be a father has to do also with you, because you and, you know, my mom got married when I was just coming out of Gurukul, and, you know, I didn't have a strong relationship with my father because they were divorced when I was 3 or something like that. So you know, a lot of what I've learned as a father is from you, seeing your, you know, selfless example of trying to be a father, you know, to me. Probably, you know, I'm just kind of, I guess I'm just like wandering around these thoughts, a lot of stuff, you know. I think one realization that I've had is I didn't realize until just recently how much Srila Prabhupada loved being a father to his own children. That's something that didn't get transmitted to me because we just heard about Prabhupada's detachment and preaching. You know that thing you spoke about hearing from Srila Prabhupada? You know he's talking about his own son. Because Srila Prabhupada, one of his sons was basically homeless. He had a mental illness and was just wandering the streets. So when Prabhupada says a father, even though the son may be separated from the father's not separated. Prabhupada's literally speaking about his own experience with his son that won't come home. So Prabhupada is very incredibly soft-hearted. And have you heard that famous speech where Prabhupada's crying, talking about sannyas? It's this incredible recording. Have you heard that? It's really worth finding. Prabhupada talks about his Guru Maharaj coming to him in his dream and telling him multiple times, at least twice, to take sannyas. And Prabhupada says, I was horrified. Horrified. You know, it's not like Prabhupada's like, woo-hoo! Yeah! Like, you know, give me a ticket. I want to know. Prabhupada's horrified. And it's interesting because I think we also know there's a little bit of culture, which, you know, this is not the forum for all these things, but there's a little bit of a culture of an awareness in our movement that Srila Prabhupada's relationship with his wife wasn't so good, which I would say, just to be open book in a sangha like this, I think in some way has negatively impacted our relationships with the women in the movement, and we paint them somehow or other with the, oh, she's one of those tier me people. You know? Tier me? You know that expression? Oh. Prabhupada's relationship with his wife was like apparently from what we understand, pretty rough. Like,
She was not as interested in preaching as he was.
well, not just that, but she also was, yeah, like,
She would actually go in a separate room with the kids and probably invite people to come over for Bud Johnson to talk.
and she
And
would
later on, eventually, there was some exchange in there. Do you know?
Well, so I think Prabhupada at one point, anyway, yeah, so at one point Prabhupada's business, Prabhupada was like, was another thing I found out recently from Raghunath Maharaj at your home. So Prabhupada, there's this recorded conversation where Prabhupada gives you like detailed information about his business life. And it's completely fascinating. Prabhupada was like ace. He was the most sought after, young, hotshot guy in the pharmaceutical industry. And someone jealously tried to take him down and got him booted out of his job to distribution.
For his own son.
And then Prabhupada killed it in distribution and was now even more successful and wealthy than he had been. And I don't want to waste too much time, but basically what happened is Prabhupada was like set to be like the most sought after young executive in all of India for the Western companies and Indian companies. And then Krishna snapped his fingers. And literally, for some weird reason, no one would hire him, just out of the blue. It was like, he explains it a little bit, but just like Krishna just changed the situation, and he couldn't get hired by anybody. And Prabhupada said it was like Krishna obviously wanted me to do something else. But anyway, yeah, during this period, my understanding is like he'd come home from these business trips, and his wife would have ordered food from him at the restaurant, like rather than cooking his own food for him, like, and he's like trying to be a devotee and he wants to eat like home cooked prasadam. She sold his Bhagavatams for tea, is like the story is. Anyway, so I think these things do color, and
That's where the expression came from.
Tea or me.
Prabhupada maybe directly said that, tea or me, you want your tea, do you want me?
Yeah.
she sold his
jokingly said
Bhagavatams.
tea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is when he was older, and he was contemplating what's the best thing to do, and that's when he moved on.
Tea or me. So I do think it's really important for us to understand that when Prabhupada talks about how Krishna consciousness that supersedes family life, I think it's not that he's pushing down family life. I think Prabhupada saw family life here and saw Krishna consciousness as even more important than that. But he was horrified. It means that he really did not want to let his family down in any way. But he knew that it was a higher calling. Not that he pushed down, in a negative way, all these things. I think that's my understanding. Anyway.
If it's possible to integrate, that would be the best of both worlds, right? If it's possible to integrate it, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I think the ideal is, we're trying to raise our kids to be devotees. Sorry for having to go on.
That's great. I feel like if for those of you who were here yesterday for the presentation on toxic masculinity and kind of how our perception of sannyas came about in terms of ISKCON, I think it hits on a lot of this. And it's like Prabhupada, I was horrified at such a contrast to what we were talking about yesterday, where things like renunciation become about power, and young men are eager to abandon their wives and children for less than noble reasons, right? What a contrast from Prabhupada's example. I don't want to rehash from yesterday, but one point I do want to share, especially maybe indicative of the fact that, like Radhika, Raman, Prabhu, and I are both sort of hyphenated. Bless you much. Bless you much. I give you blessings. That's not the much would be attached. But I kind of do. We should all give blessings to each other. Anyway.
Let's take a Zintite, it's okay.
But I have to say, maybe it's because the Indian American thing, but I think in some ways, the East-West mix that many of us, either personally or as part of this community and this tradition experience, it has a really beautiful side to it and a beautiful potential to it. Like we were talking, right, about could be the best of both worlds and really kind of do a lot of out of the box things and challenge boxes and conventions. But on the flip side, sometimes you can get the worst of both worlds. And my personal observation or speculation about it is, in certain areas, I think ISKCON, unfortunately, we've taken the worst of East and West. And I think this is one example where there's a kind of a trope that maybe is starting to change, but in some old world cultures, and I think Indian culture is like this, there can be a kind of a perceived aloofness that fathers have. You know, it's not always the case, but as a generalization, right? Oh, the mother is kind of doing the day-to-day, the real parenting, and I show my love by working hard and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And there's some truth to that, but that can also become a kind of an unhealthy, you know, extreme kind of position. And so in some ways, maybe in ISKCON, we've kind of leaned on that side of the Eastern example without balancing it out with other aspects. And then on the West side, on the Western side, also maybe, you know, some of this hippie culture and kind of a culture of like irresponsibility and whimsicality and things like that, and the worst of both. So maybe that's part of how it's played out. But I do think we have a real opportunity to change that, and particularly speaking as, and we can talk more about this aspect if folks are interested, but as a father of a daughter. And I want to be careful here because there's limits to sort of generalizing about men and women and masculinity and femininity. But as long as we're generalizing, I do believe that for daughters it's really important to have healthy, deep, loving, honest and open relationships with their fathers. And a lot of these daughters, right? What's that verse? I don't remember the Sanskrit, but I remember the English. I think it goes, "Fathers, be good to your daughters."
So,
Daughters.
It's a verse by John Mayer.
John Mayer, that's the Anyway, there's a popular, those of you who don't know, there's a popular song.
Fathers, be good to your daughters. Mothers, be good to your
Daughters, be love like you do.
Daughters, turn into lovers and become mothers, or something like that.
Fathers, be good to your daughters too. Yeah.
Right. So it's talking about how they learn from you how to become who they're going to be.
I mean,
good song.
It's a good song in some ways, but I think there's some truth in there in that, like, daughters, especially from their fathers, learn how to love and be loved, and in many cases will then project that out or seek that out in their future partners, or maybe they're seeking to heal that in their future partners. And anyway, it's complicated, but I feel like that's an added responsibility, specifically thinking about daughters, that fathers have and should take, and I'm hoping to do my part to do that.
So just a couple of thoughts to add to all these wonderful comments from my fellow panelists. I was reflecting as John was doing his presentation earlier. I don't know if he's here. But yeah. The number of times he said, you know, if they had a male mentor or they didn't have a male mentor in their life, someone who could tell them. And you know, a father is important at every stage of a child's development. But I've been recognizing now as my boys grow older, just how much more my role is crucial for them. And, you know, this has been one of the reasons, for example, I've made some decisions to reduce travel and reduce commitments of various kinds, just recognizing the fact that there's no one else who can do the role that I'm doing, right? No one in the world who can do that. And also, there's no other opportunity I'm going to get to do it, right? So not only am I the only person, but this is the only opportunity that I'm going to have. And it only lasts a few years. I mean, honestly, 12 years have gone by so quickly. I still, like I said earlier, I still remember the first time he cried and what I felt like, and that was just yesterday. So time just flies so quickly, and now, only a few more years? And then he's going to be busy with his own priorities and his own goals in life and aspirations and all of that. So it's a very small window of opportunity and a very small set of people who can actually do what I need to do with my voice. And it was that kind of realization that hit me one day, and I thought, this has to be a priority. The world is still going to be there once they're grown up, and every other responsibility and every other reason for stress is still going to be there. And this is not, right? And this special moment is not going to be there either. And so just kind of reminding myself of that and recognizing, oh, I'm really busy thinking or doing this, but he's in the backseat of the car talking to me. And this seems like a really interesting point he's trying to make. And I really need to listen. And this has to be first priority, regardless of where we're going and when we need to get there and how we're going to get there, right? Because this moment is never going to come back. And this is something that I heard from Radhanath Maharaj, not directly, but through one of his disciples. And I forget who it was. It may have been one of you on the panel, but he said, I can take care of everything. You're the only one who can take care of your children. And so you need to make that first priority. And it's something that, even though it was secondhand, it stays stuck with me a long time. You know, on that also with Chaitanya and Purushottam, it's kind of the way I see my role is helping them to recognize what a man can be, right? Maybe not what a man should be, because I don't know if I'm ideal, but at least showing them what those possibilities are, right? What a man can be. And one of the most important things I find in terms of that parenting or fatherhood, that example, is even more than my relationship with them, is my relationship with Amrita, my relationship with their mother. Because it just, you know, I want them to grow up and recognize that as a man, they have a responsibility to their future wife, to their children, to the community, and they watch everything, right? And one of the biggest aspects, I think, the biggest impact on their life is when they're watching me and Amrita interact. Right? That's like, and it goes to this whole point of toxic masculinity, right? If that's the only model of husband that you see, is the one shouting across from the kitchen counter, or the only idea of fatherhood they see is this distant, you know, I'm the boss and don't ask me any questions sort of thing, then that's what they internalize. That's what they see. The last thing I wanted to say is, in relation to the comments on Srila Prabhupada that we've been hearing, it's always struck me how often Srila Prabhupada talks about his own father. He remembers him over and over and over again. He dedicates Krishna book to him. He writes about him in the purports to Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a beautiful purport about Maharaj Parikshit, which talks about how when Parikshit was a child, he used to play with Krishna dolls. Yeah. Right? And Prabhupada says all of the great devotees, in their childhood, they play with Krishna as deities or as dolls. And then he gives his own example. And there's so much gratitude in his voice towards his father that when we wanted to, he gave us Radha Krishna deities. And that was our childhood play. And we watched him, and then we did something similar. And he remembers the way that his father insisted on his learning Mridanga, and the way that his father had hopes and aspirations for him to become a devotee of Srimati Radharani. And what? And a Mridanga player. So it's just like you see his relationship with his father, and it's you know, you see the father's role in the formation of a devotee, and it's you kind of realize just how much of a responsibility it is. My own relationship with Srila Prabhupada also has always been in the mode of a father, you know, and that kind of Yeah, it's obviously he is a guru, and he is Parama Guru, my guru's guru, and he has laid down the law for the next 10,000 years and all of that. But I think there's something really special about knowing him and recognizing him as a father. When he speaks to you through his books, he's speaking as a father would. And occasionally there are things that you don't understand from your father, right? We all have that experience. Occasionally there are things that just blow you out of the water and you think, wow, that's incredible, I'll keep that piece. And this part, so it's a dynamic relationship. But just thinking of oneself as a child, dancing before the Vyasa-san during Guru Puja, that's kind of been my relationship with him, my meditation.
Just gonna add, we talk about Prabhupada's affection. Prabhupada's remembering how his father wanted him to play Mridanga, wanted him to be devotee of Raman. He gave him the Radhika card.
Oh yeah, that too.
That's very important. And also just there's the other balance of the well-known story of Prabhupada was a little boy wanting a gun in the market. And, so his father indulged him and bought him a gun in the market because he was very upset that he wanted a gun in the market. And then he laid down on the street. Then he told his father he wanted the second one. And his father said, you already have one. And he laid down on the street and started kicking his feet and crying. And his father said, why are you crying? Why do you need two? He said, I have two hands. So his father bought him a second little pretend gun. Of course, these days, gun is kind of like a touchy topic in America. Should you give your kids guns or not? But putting aside that.
We are in West Virginia, so.
But the idea that is sometimes, okay, I love my son, therefore I make him go to Mangalartik, I make him practice the drum, I make him, there's the other side too, which is probably very indulgent in terms of he's a kid, Remember a couple of times that Vani would say to me, okay, we're going on some family vacation. And my mind is, okay, well, at 9 o'clock we'll tour the museum, then we'll hit the beach at 12, and then we can do this at 4. And he's like, Pitta, these are kids. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, they're kids. Okay, so what are we going to do, Lord? Since it doesn't matter, wherever you are, they're kids. They're just going to do it. I was like, okay, no museum at 9 o'clock, nothing. I got to reprogram. So,
Before you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I'm
Then
leaving.
we're going to go to questions, so if you have, do you think it's some questions here?
Unfortunately, I have a memorial service for a friend of the devotees that I have to go to. So I'm leaving early tomorrow morning, so I don't get to stay through tomorrow. I apologize for that. But because I have the microphone, there is one really, something very important to me that I wanted to try and share. And this is probably the best chance to do it. I feel like we have an opportunity to do what Venkata said, which is take the best of the East and the best of the West. And I feel like those of us who are here in this retreat, almost like we've been picked to do that. I feel like Vedic culture is actually not what many of us think it is. I feel Vedic culture was incredibly inclusive and made room for anyone, whatever situation you're in, because the point of Vedic culture was to bring people closer to the feet of Vishnu. Right? How do you take someone from where they are and make a pathway for them to go to Krishna? Right? So that's really what Vedic culture is all about. And everything else is just like details. So in a sense, I could make the argument, if we were, being crafty, I could make the argument that actually the best place in the world right now for people to reawaken Sanatana Dharma or Varnashram or whatever is in a gathering of people from different places around the earth. Because when Vedic culture flourished, it wasn't Indian, it was global, right? And it was even connected to the demigods in the higher realm. It was global. Which means you've got people from the north, people from the east. Like the understanding that I have is that Kurukshetra was warriors from all over the earth, looking different from all kinds of interesting people coming together to fight for the globe. So you can make the case that the best gathering to be able to reimagine and reawaken Vedic culture would be in a gathering like this with people from many different backgrounds. And we're not here to be Indian. We're not here to be American. We're not here to be Canadian. We're not here to be I don't know, like wherever we're from, we're actually here to help each other to reach the highest possible uh, um, shared, co-created reality of what Krishna consciousness can be. So I just want to say that I feel like this gathering is quite unique because how many gatherings like this are there in the movement in the West where devotees are coming together specifically with the purpose of reimagining what it means to be X in a context with other devotees. We're actually reimagining what it means to be a man, not just in the devotee context, but in society. Like, this is a very revolutionary thing that we're doing, and it's going to set the tone for future generations, even though it may not feel it's that grand. It really is that grand. I just wanted to put that plug in for what you guys are trying to do. Sorry.
I just want to mention too, I think it's a sign of our society. We've got sannyasis and brahmacharis sitting in this discussion. Because I know, kind of like when I was a brahmachari, it's like the last thing you wanted to hear about is grihastha life, because maybe my mind will get agitated or whatever. But I remember a few years ago, sannyasis started going to weddings. And I thought that was such a symbol of maturation of our society, because it's not about some disturbing sensual relationship. It's a commitment between two people to be devotees together and to bring devotees in the world and try to dedicate their lives. I mean, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, and to have that vision. And I know, again, Radha Swami company mentioned, one of the things in Champatis is this emphasis on how ashrams need to be aligned with each other. And it is so important. It's like, okay, I'm a grihastha, you're brahmachari. Wow, brahmachari, go for it. And you meet some brahmacharis like, yeah, we got to preach and do this. And you're like, wow, that's fantastic. And the brahmacharis be able to say, wow, we really need families here. And sannyasis say, wow, we really need families. All of these different, as you're saying, everybody has a role to play. And we depend on each other. And we all know, where would we be without sannyasis? We would be lost spiritually. And where would we be without that brahmachari energy? Who's going to go and attract all the young people? Who's going to play the drum for 8 hours in a row? And all those kind of things. Other than a few grihasthas that are still trying. But so yeah, we need each other. So maybe we'll open up for questions. Now I have 5 other questions here. We want to take questions from the audience. Bhatta, Prabhu. Maybe we can use that mic to go around. And then we'll share this. You can ask it. Maybe we're just going to ask one question, one answer to see. And if there's no other hands go up, we'll have everybody answer that question, and just to make sure that everybody can kind of participate if they like. So one question, if you want to direct it to one person, that's fine, or we'll pick somebody here.
Hare Krishna. May I please share something that's related to this topic?
I've been a lot of conferences in Washington, D.C., and they always preface it so. Now we'd like to ask for questions. And please be sure that your question is not a carefully designed statement in the name of a question. A standard, if you're at a good conference, that's a standard opening in Washington, D.C. before they open to the floor. So keeping that in mind, Bhatta, because your comments are always very good. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I would like to share something, and then I'll ask a question. The 3 topics which are about fatherhood and addiction and toxic masculinity, I feel are all connected. And so I was raised in Kuwait, a very sheltered country, and I wasn't exposed to all the bad things of the West except Hollywood movies and Burger King and Pizza Hut. So then I came here and I lost that close connection with my parents, and I remember that I always ate breakfast and lunch with my parents, and that was like a foundation, and it connects to giving and receiving prasadam. And also the years between me moving to Canada and then finding the spiritual community, the Hare Krishnas, the spiritual family, were the years where I got into addiction, and I was feeling that that was the solace for my lack of connection with my parents. But as soon as I found my spiritual family, all the addictions vanish easily. So I feel that as Gabor Mate, a famous psychologist, says, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's emotional connection. I feel it's very important to have the fatherly figure, the mother, and then also there's a study that proves that most men who have sexual addiction or who mistreat women do not have respect for their mother, and that's why they act in that way. So my question is, do you feel that the connection between these three topics is important to emphasize and kind of like talk about, toxic masculinity and addiction and all that with children as well as a father, even though they're heavy subjects, and to emphasize eating together, because I feel that's very powerful.
We actually have a mic you can keep.
Yeah.
No, I would take it.
Yeah.
Doesn't have anything to say about
I want to be the person to give you the.
He told me he doesn't have
Or Vani's, he's mischievous. I wanted to mention something about, because I came in a little late, so I don't know if this was covered in toxic masculinity yesterday.
With part of it.
So I don't know if this was covered, but one of the things I wanted to mention is that the objectification of women, the marginalization of women, the exploitation of women, violence against women is not a Western phenomenon. It is ubiquitous. It's all over the world. There's not other than Antarctica, there's not a continent you can go to where you don't find that. In epidemic proportions. Here in America, the statistics are startling, but they're not unique to America. I think it's 1 in 3 women suffer sexual assault in their lifetime, something like that. Yeah, it's startling, it's amazing, it's horrible. So the discussion on toxic masculinity occurs within this context, that women are abused and under attack, and by men, by us, people in men's body. And so, and of course, this leads us into spiritual communities as well. It's in our communities as well. We bring that with us. And so I just wanted to mention that. And that, so it's in terms of childbearing, it's the responsibility of all fathers to raise men, raise their voice to be men who, as Prabhu was talking about, who respect women. And who value women. And part of that, of course, a big part of that is modeling behavior with your wife. But and also we have frank discussions with my boys, now men, when they were growing up, I would tell them, what's your first priority? To protect mommy, to serve mommy, to help mommy. This is as boys, they were drilled this. And this has manifested as they become men, that they see all women as mommies that they need to protect and respect and defend. So it's a problem with our society, and something that we can do something about both externally and internally.
Thank you for all your great information, especially the last 3 Prabhus, because I have children raised. My wife and I, Purnamasi, were blessed with 4 wonderful children, which we raised, not in the time of the distraction of technology and telephones and just all the distractions that are out there now. We took them camping, we took them to the beach, we took them on family vacations. We didn't have that telephone distraction. My problem is with my grandsons, okay? So now I have a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 13-year-old. And I'm trying to find something to get them to set their phone down and do something with me. Now, recently I did find something, and now when I ask them, they jump right away. I said, come on, let's go for a walk. So I take them for a walk, a short walk, not long, and they really seem to open up. Because they don't have that telephone in front of them, and they can't go anywhere, they're walking with you. So I really listen to them at that time. Not only is it good for your waistline, but you get a lot of good information from them when you're walking, because it's just one-on-one. It's really nice. Bhakti Mark Swami got to spend some time with my youngest son, Zach, last year. He still talks about that, by the way. So my question is, how do you get them, without forcing them, to set those phones down and do something with you?
I'm going to get my notebook out and try to take notes while Gaura, Vani and Radhika answer the question, because I don't think I have a very good answer yet. But I want to learn, I want to know.
Have you guys seen the movie Social Dilemma? Anyone who's planning to have anything to do with children should watch this movie.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Is it the documentary? Yeah, so good.
It's really important information, Social Dilemma. If you have anything to do with children, like at all, you should watch this movie. It really explains in a very straightforward way how and what is happening right now using technology. The other thing that okay, well, basically, we're all doomed.
Okay, let's have kirtan now.
Well, actually, that's an interesting point. So you were going to say something?
I was just going to, John in his presentation was kind of hinting at it a little bit in terms of algorithms and predictions of what you're going to do, and things that we think are coincidental or we think are, innocuous or just happening, or I'm in control. That there are, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, and which is why this documentary lays it out in a really straightforward way. But essentially, that there is a method to the madness, so to speak, and that method is agenda-driven, and the agenda is not our safety or mental, physical, or emotional health. It's making people lots of money and getting people lots of data. And so this documentary kind of explores what happens behind the scenes when someone is innocuously, engaging with social media, particularly young people, young adults. What is the algorithm then sending them to or providing for them, and how, I think, Radhika, when you were talking about conformity and how, even without us being consciously aware of it, how we're actually being molded and shaped, and our characters being shaped. And this documentary shows in a very straightforward, very fact-driven way how it happens and what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah,
Oh, and sorry, just one more thing. And I seem to remember in the documentary that they have people who are very high level at these companies, and almost all of them to a person are like, yeah, I don't let my kids be on this platform.
exactly what I was going to say. So it turns out that most of the owners of these companies, the Facebooks and Apples and whatever, their own children, they forbid them from having social media. Now, that used to really bother me, because of course if you have billions of dollars, you can keep your kids occupied with people dancing in front of them, whatever you do. And said, don't play that video game, here's a car, whatever. But my Pitta just said kirtan, and I want to just highlight this. There are not that many communities in the world where the young people make the music. On the entire planet. Most communities, even very musical communities, the older people make the music and the young people help and learn. But we have this phenomenon through Prabhupada and Mahaprabhu's mercy where the young people are better at the music than anyone else. So anyone who feels really old school when you see boys and girls in kirtan together, I would just like to submit this for your consideration. Boys and girls are mixing at school, on the internet, on social media, constantly, without your supervision. Why not also let them mix in kirtan in front of the Lord with other devotees standing around?
Being joyous.
Being joyous, learning how to love Krishna and express themselves. This is something that I really think we need to take seriously. The devotees will see, my son was playing Mridanga, he was looking at this young girl. You're not allowed to go to Friday night kirtan anymore. That's nonsense. What are you doing? You're not chanting the holy name. Go home and do your homework. But the reality is that mixing is already happening. But instead we're giving them a vehicle and we're channeling that energy toward Krishna. Those devotees eventually become married. How beautiful it is. You tell your parents, where did you meet? We met in kirtan. Like our whole family is built in kirtan. We came from kirtan. You were conceived from kirtan. That's where you came from, kids. But all joking aside, I've had many people tell me that when they were conceiving their kids, as well as when they had giving birth to their kids, they were playing kirtan music, and some of it that I helped make. I've had so many people tell me, my son was born to your song. It's really incredible. Devotees, kirtan is the fabric of our lives, and I really think, for devotees at least, encouraging your kids to be part of live kirtan is definitely an antidote for some of this stuff.
We have time for one more question. Okay, we have time for one more answer.
It's just about social media and children, real quick, because the studies show that if you look at feelings of self-worth or rates of depression in men and boys and girls, 15 to 25, they were pretty much the same in the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 200s, around 2007, 2008, they start to tick up, and they've been going up ever since. This corresponds with the same time that growth of use of social media. Not only that, if you correlate time spent on social media, it directly correlates with, in terms of decreasing sense of self-worth and increasing rates of depression. There's a direct correlation with the time young people spend on social media and these negative changes that they have in terms of their self-worth.
Sorry, I was being a little facetious before. I do want to say on a very sort of practical level, and we can disagree. Like, there's no, I don't think there's one magic formula or one size fits all answer. And different parenting, like friends, will disagree.
I was just wondering what you guys did.
Yeah.
I started walking with you, and that really worked. So I just wondered what you guys do.
Yeah. So one thing I want to put out there is also, it's a little humbling, but my wife and I have also learned we just choose our battles, and there's some hills that are just not worth dying on, and so
That was a toxic masculinity.
it's bringing it out.
Some hills not worth dying for.
But right? We're trying to have this sort of long-term. It's hard, right? Like with anything else, to manage sort of short-term possible harms with long-term vision for what's going to be best in the long haul for the relationship. And I've learned that my wife has been so good with helping me and kind of de-escalating things, because my response is generally, I'll be I'll go into attack mode or debate mode or whatever. I hate is a strong word. I have a strong aversion to the phenomenon of YouTubers, particularly YouTubers directed at preteens and teens. First of all, I don't even understand half of what they're saying, why they exist. I resent the fact that they're making millions of dollars from doing this. I'm at the age of 16, 17-year-olds are literally multimillionaires because of making YouTube videos, some of which are, honestly, my daughter will watch YouTube videos of a YouTuber watching another YouTuber's video reacting to it. So the first jerk is making $1 million, and the second jerk who's reacting to jerk number one is making $2 million off of it. And my daughter is just like this like sheep consumer who's just taking it all in. So it bothers me so much. And then I've also learned like the more I resist that and argue against it and stuff, the more I'm solidifying in her mind, my dad's an idiot who doesn't know what he's doing. And of course he's going to want to stop me because he's so unenlightened and such a boomer and this and that. So in certain cases, it's just a matter of, we've found sometimes there's more wisdom in holding back strategically and, biting our tongues in certain situations so that we have some currency for, the bigger battle. Lose the battle in the war, yeah. And then the second thing I just remembered, a little bit different than the kirtan example, and I'm not saying this to like brag on my daughter by any means, but one thing that we've been pleasantly surprised to discover is somehow this kid likes service. So like we'll go to a festival, and if we're just expecting her to attend the festival and like the class and even the kirtans to an extent, she gets into the kirtans a little bit, but right now, that's when she'll be like, Mommy, can I have your phone? And she'll just want to go to the screen. But somehow she's just like, she gets excited about like if she can be engaged in like helping to serve out the prasada, clean up afterwards, set up beforehand, making Gaura, whatever it is. It doesn't even have to be particular services as much as just the idea of being engaged in service. Somehow that's like a game changer for her. And then she herself like will just be like put the phone away, put the device away, like I'm busy. So that's worked for us.
I think just some takeaways that we can see there's so many varieties in what kind of kids come, and you can mold them a little bit, as I heard, but they're very unique personalities. From the first cry, I learned something today. Before Vani was 8 years old, he didn't cry a lot at 8 years old when he came into my life. So I haven't had that crying baby experience. But we can help them develop, but not force anybody. And I think that this variety of we're like watering the flower of this lovely soul that's come into our lives and our family, and to help assist them in that way of being the best person they can be. I think it's because I'm thinking we are videotaping this, and I'm hoping that beyond this room, this maybe this very instructive panel. I don't know if anybody else in the world has these kind of panels, maybe even a lot, but I don't think so. To kind of share this, and I think this message that there's what matters is giving protection and care and setting the best example you can. I'm thinking of this one story, and I wasn't sure if it was appropriate. I'm going to try, maybe it won't be. But remember, one of the things I do is interact with communities that are sometimes a little critical of new religious movements. So we went to hear a rabbi a few years ago speak in Denver, a long time ago, 20 years ago, to a crowd of mostly Jewish people. We went in our regular, Western dress, so we wouldn't be too intrusive to what they were doing. And he was going around about, this organization, your kid's at risk with this group of people, this group of people, this group of people. And people were saying, well, what's the most important thing you can do? So then he kind of challenged his audience a little bit, because they were all there to hear about all the problems in the world, and specifically about organizations that can prey on your kids. But, social media is like a big multi-billion-dollar organization, crazy on the kid. So he challenged and said, I want to ask all of you, and again, mostly Jewish guy, as a rabbi, he said, how many of you, if a cameraman came and followed you around for 24 hours, how many of them would know you were Jewish? And he said, if that cameraman didn't show that, then how are your kids going to know? Where's the example set for them? And I think, most of the people in this room probably, they would see you're a devotee, but there may be people in our larger community. The idea that, as they say oftentimes, the most important role for the parents, and I think the four of you model this beautifully, is to set that role model, as how I interact with my wife, how I raise my boys to interact with the wife, how I try to teach my children by my own example, how I try to encourage them. Okay, you don't like kirtan, great, you love to do service, and to show them, Vani's always showing his kids how much he loves Krishna. You can't force anybody to love Krishna, but you can open the door and show how you love Krishna. And I think that's such an important message as fathers, to set an example and to facilitate them in their spiritual life as they're inclined. So that's what this rabbi was saying, are you setting an example yourself? And if you are, that's the best you can do. Because the kids look to their parents, I think, more than anything else, as role models. You know, it's like when you say, when I was thinking, like, when Vani was about 15, he went to live in Los Angeles for a while, and Rukmini and I, his mother, would go out and we'd visit him sometimes. And, you know, he's a pretty smart guy, so I can remember we'd go someplace for the afternoon, and he would just start throwing all these challenges out. Well, what about this, what about this, what about that? It was really obvious to us, okay, he's been hanging out on Wasika Boulevard, listening to every devotee of various philosophical bents, and his mother would like right out of the Bhagavatam, she's like fainting practically every question he has. Oh my God, who put these ideas in my boy's head? You know, and I was saying to her, you know, that this is like Radhika said, this is exactly what we want to do with our young teenage son. The fact that he feels comfortable enough, as I understood it, to say these things, to talk about these things, and it wasn't like, don't you dare say that about ISKCON, or how can you say that about so-and-so Swami, or how can you have that doubt about Prabhupada, or how can you, it was like, we want to hear those questions, we want to have this open, healthy give and take, just like all of us, we have doubts and questions and concerns. As in the presentation earlier about confidentiality, being able to reveal our minds in a safe space, so that's so important. And I've seen too many examples of parents that, you know, bring a kid to a temple, and the first thing they say is sit down and be quiet. You know, before the 45-minute lecture, I'm thinking, I can barely sit through this person's lecture. With, you know, due respect to earlier talks about we should be humble and learn from everybody. And here you're telling an 8-year-old or 12-year-old, and we know what's going to happen. The day they hit 12 or 13 or 14, whenever, they're going to say, I'm not coming here anymore. As soon as they can say no, it's going to be no. So I think that's something that didn't come out loud here. Just maybe add that as the last thing we'll wrap up. It's so important to make sure your kids have fun. I mean, it's a Krishna conscious duty to make sure your kids have fun. And when they come to the temple, they love to do service, let them do service. If they want to chant with boys and girls and teenagers, let them do that. Help them find who they are in Krishna consciousness. And don't think it has to be in following exactly your footsteps, or that, you know, at 5 years old or 10 years old or 15 years old, that the Krishna consciousness is all about tapasya. Because it's not. Maybe when you're 25, most of us also, we want to have fun at the temple. So to make sure our kids have fun in Krishna consciousness, if they have fun, then they're going to take it on board. And you're smiling.
Can I tell a super short story?
Yeah, then we'll wrap it up.
So how many devotees here know Radhika Swami? So he's very famous for being beloved by the young people in the movement. And he used to run the boys' bus tour. He just recently became initiating guru, and immediately there's a lot of young people who are flocking to take initiation from him, who wouldn't have really been connected to someone else. So the story he likes to tell is one very serious ISKCON sannyasi came to him because all the boys were at the temple playing soccer. And he said, you know, Maharaj, you have all these young people for the summer. You know, they're so frivolous. Look at them, you know. They should be taking Krishna consciousness. They should be doing something serious. They should be very serious instead of all these frivolous things. And Maharaj said to them, oh, you don't understand these boys. They're very serious about their soccer.
Let's be very serious and showing our appreciation to this wonderful